Masechet Baba Batra Daf Kof Chaf Tet. The Mishnah taught Hamchalek nechasav al piv riba leechad umi'at leechad vechule. The case is someone on his deathbed who is dividing up his property to his inheritors, and instead of giving his sons all an equal amount, he wants to give more to one and less to another, and that's what he says. So, it depends. Does that work or not? If he says it only as an inheritance, he only uses the word, you will inherit this a lot and you will inherit a little, then it doesn't work, because then he's making a condition against the Torah. Torah says you have to give equal to everyone except the firstborn, who gets double. So it won't work. However, if he uses a language of a gift, then that's okay, because as long as he's alive, he can gift his property to anybody he wants. He can give everything away to some stranger in the street. He can do whatever he wants. And furthermore, even if he uses both words, inheritance and a gift, as long as he said a gift somewhere in the beginning and the middle or at the end, then we can latch on to that language and say, okay, that's what he meant, to give it as a gift, and therefore it is valid. That was the Mishnah. Now the Gemara is going to clarify the precise case. Hechi dame matana batechila, hechi dame ba'emsa, hechi dame basof. What do you mean if it says the language of a gift in the beginning or the middle or the end? Ki ata Rav Dimi amar Rabbi Yochanan. We're going to see several different opinions about what this terminology means. And here's opinion number one. It's in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, who lived in Eretz Yisrael and was reported by his student Rav Dimi, who came often to Bavel. We're going to see there's going to be another report in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. So this is Rav Dimi. In the name of Rabbi Yochanan says, Tinaten sadeh pelonit lifloni v'yirasheha zohi matana batechila. If someone says, I want to give this field to this person, and at first uses the word tinaten, let it be given, meaning as a gift. Tinaten is from the root natan, same root as the word matana. So he said gift first, and even though at the end he said, and he will inherit it, that's what's called saying matana at the beginning, and that would be valid. V'yirasheha v'tinaten lo zohi matana basof. If he says, this field to this person, give and he will inherit. So, sorry, another way around, inherit and give it to him. So that's the case of saying a gift last. V'yirasheha v'tinaten lo v'yirasheha zohi matana ba'emsa. And if he says, this field to this person, I want to bequeath it and give it to him and bequeath it, in that case, the gift statement is in the middle. It doesn't matter where it is. Any of these placements is valid, even if he's giving everything to one person, or more to one person and less to the other person, as long as he said the language of gift somewhere in there, it's a valid statement. And now Rav Dimi, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, continues and limits the case of the Mishnah. Bedavka be'adam echad ve'sadeh echat, aval be'adam echad ushte sadot, sadeh achat ushne b'nei adam lo. This leniency that even if you said both languages, it works as long as you said the word matana somewhere or another. That's only true if the guy on his deathbed is giving one field to one person, right? He's talking about this field, I want to give to that person. And then he says, also inherit and give and inherit. Then that's fine, that works, because since he used two different types of language, and the inheritance word is not going to work, because if you want to give an entire field to one person, even if it's a son, then it's not inheritance. It doesn't go with inheritance law. So the word inheritance cannot apply, but the word gift can apply. So we assume that that's what he meant. He meant just to give it as a gift, and therefore it's valid. However, if there's two things or two people involved, then it's no good. So if it's one person but two fields, he said, the field A and field B, I want to give as a gift, bequeath to a certain person. Well, then it's not clear that both of them can work. Maybe he meant only one, since he said field A and field B, and then he used two different verbs, bequeath and give as a gift. So maybe what he means is field A should be bequeathed as an inheritance, and field B should be a gift. So in that case, only one of the fields can go to that designated person, and because we can fit each verb with one or the other. So in that case, the full statement will not be valid. And similarly, let's say it's talking about one field, and it says, I want to give this field to these two people. All right, Reuven and Shimon should get this field, and he says they should inherit it and receive it as a gift. Well, in that case also, maybe he meant that Reuven should inherit it and Shimon should receive it as a gift. We don't know what he meant. We cannot assume that he meant that the word gift should be applied to both of them, and therefore we would only apply it to one of them, and therefore the full statement is not valid. Okay, that's Rabbi Yochanan according to Rav Dimi, which makes sense. Now, Rabbi Elazar Omer, Rav Dimi reported further that according to Rabbi Elazar, who is also from Eretz Yisrael, he says differently, Afilu Adam Echad Ushte Sadot, Sadeh Achat Ushne Bnei Adam, Aval Bishte Sadot Ushne Bnei Adam, Lo. Rabbi Elazar said the full statement is valid even in these two cases of 2 and 1 or 1 and 2, even if it's one person and two fields, or one field and two people, still valid, because he said two verbs, but there's only, let's say there's one field. So he's talking about one field. So the field that he is giving over, either it's going to be a gift or an inheritance. Now, it cannot be an inheritance to two people, because that doesn't make sense. It can't be inheritance because you're giving more to one person and not equal to all the brothers. So since the word inheritance cannot apply to the full giving of the field, so we assume that he meant a gift for both people. And the same thing the other way around, when it's two fields, but it's going to the same person. So it makes sense that he's saying, even though he said inherit and a gift, we assume that he means a gift, and he's giving both fields as a gift because it's talking about one person. So it wouldn't really make sense that he's doing one verb for one of the fields and a different verb for another of the fields if they're both going to the same person. So since they're going to the same person, and inheritance does not work because you can't give more to one of the sons, so therefore in either of these cases, since it's either one field or one person, we assume that only one of the verbs applies, and we pick the one that can work for both of them, and that is the gift. So therefore it's valid. However, aval bishte sadot ushne bnei adam lo. But if he's giving two different fields to two different people, meaning there's two fields, and he says, I want field A to go to Reuven and field B to go to Shimon, and then he adds two verbs, and they should inherit it and receive it as a gift. Well, in that case, since it's two separate transactions completely, then it actually makes sense that one of them he meant as an inheritance, and the other, total different field and person, he meant as a gift. And so we cannot say that both of them are valid. Only one of them will be valid, whichever one he meant as a gift. But the other one that we should assume, since he has two separate transactions and two verbs, then we do not assume that the word gift applies to both of them, and therefore it does not take full effect. His statement does not. Okay, so that's Rabbi Elazar that makes that distinction. All right, so far we have the opinion of the report of Rav Dimi and the statement of Rabbi Yochanan, who says that it has to be one person and one field. So that's the most stringent, and Rabbi Elazar who takes the middle position. And now we have another report. Ki ata Ravin. When Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he said a different report. Amar, Tinaten sadeh pilonit leploni, virash piloni sadeh pilonit. Rabbi Yochanan omer kana. Rabbi Elazar omer lo kana. If someone says, I want to give this field to this person, and then he says it as a language of a gift. And then he says, I want to inherit, to bequeath this field to that person. So this is a case of two fields and two people where he uses two different types of language. Is that valid or not? Rabbi Yochanan says, yes, it's valid. It goes ahead. Now, this is very interesting because the previous Rabbi Yochanan was the most stringent, and now this one is the most lenient and says even 2 fields to 2 people is okay. Rabbi Elazar Omer lo kana. Rabbi Elazar says that if it's 2 fields to 2 people, then it's no good. Well, that's okay. That is consistent with what the other report of Rabbi Elazar here, because here Rabbi Elazar said you can do 2 to 1 or 1 to 2, but not 2 to 2. And that's consistent with what Rabin said in Rabbi Elazar's name, that also you cannot do 2 to 2. So now, Amar le Abaye le Rabin. Abaye, who's in Bavel, tells Rabin, Anechatat lan hada ve'at kafat lan hada. He says, you have helped us out, lightened our burden with one of the statements that you said regarding Rabbi Elazar, but you have made it difficult for us in the other statement that you said regarding Rabbi Yochanan. Bishlamad Rabbi Elazar ad Rabbi Elazar la kashya. Kan be'adam echad ushte sadot, kan bishne b'nei adam ushte sadot. There's no problem between the 2 reports that we heard from Rabbi Elazar, because if you're talking about 1 person and 2 fields, then that works. That was the first statement we said from Rav Dimi in the name of Rabbi Elazar. And you, Ravin, you're talking about 2 people and 2 fields, and you said it's no good. So that makes sense. These are 2 different cases and perfectly consistent. Ela de Rabbi Yochanan ad Rabbi Yochanan kashya. But the 2 reports that we heard in the name of Rabbi Yochanan are very difficult. They totally contradict each other. The first one that we heard from Rav Dimi had Rabbi Yochanan being very strict, that the formula only works if it's 1 person and 1 field. And now Ravin came and said, even 2 fields to 2 people, the formula works. So what do we do with this? And the answer is, Amora'enin hu v'alibad Rabbi Yochanan. In fact, there are 2 Amoraim, 2 traditions about what Rabbi Yochanan said. And so that's it. We have 2 reports about what he said. And so that's the way we leave it. And now there is yet another opinion, which is most similar to the middle opinion that we saw in the name of Rabbi Elazar. Veresh Lakish Amar, Lo Kana Ad Sheyomar, Peloni Ufloni, Yirshu Sadeh Pelonit Uflonit, Shenetatim Lahem Bematana Ve'yirashum. Resh Lakish is explaining, let's say a person does want to give 2 fields to 2 people. In what case would such a formula work, even though he said 2 verbs? And he said, well, you can still make it work if you say, this person and that person, Reuven and Shimon, I want them to inherit field A and field B that I am giving to them as a gift, and they should inherit it. So in this case, because first of all, he has 2 words that say gift, even though he also has 2 words that say inherit, Yidashu and that Yidashum at the end. But in the middle, he says nitatim and matana. That's number 1. There's 2 verbs for giving. That's good. And also, the word giving is applied in the plural. Nitatim. I'm giving them as a gift. So them referring to both fields. So here it's clear. It's not, the whole thing is not so clear because it uses 2 contradictory verbs. But it's we have the word matana twice, and in fact, even stronger than that, it's in plural. So it's clear that if we can find the word matana, that it applies to both, and we can tell. Even though he said inherit because he's on his deathbed. So it's kind of like he's bequeathing it. But in fact, he's doing it not in the standard Torah way, but as long as he said the word gift in this way, in plural, so that we can assume that he meant it to apply to both fields that are being given to both people, and thereby it will work. So Ravin says, as long as you say it this way, it's okay. And so it could be, this is consistent with Rabbi Elazar's opinion, giving even a little bit more lenient than what Rabbi Elazar told us, saying that there is a way in which 2 to 2 could work. All right, that's all the opinions of the sages from Eretz Yisrael. And now we say, Biflugta, the machloket between the sages of Eretz Yisrael is parallel to the same controversy among Amoraim from Bavel. Amar Rav Hamnuna, Lo shanu ela adam echad vesadeh echat, aval adam echad ushte sadot, usadeh echad ushte bnei adam lo. So Rav Hamnuna said, the law of the Mishnah that permits, when you say two different verbs, and we say it's permitted because we assume he meant the gift-giving verb, that's only true if the bequeather is giving one field to one person. But if it's one person and two fields, or one field and two people, then it's no good. So this is the stringent view, like the first report in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Nachman amar, afilu adam echad ushte sadot, sadeh achat ushne bnei adam, aval shete sadot ushne bnei adam, lo. Rav Nachman is the middle position, like Rabbi Elazar, that even if it's one person and two fields, or one field and two people, that's okay. Because since there's one of the things is a one, and he said a verb of giving, so we can assume that verb applies to both fields that are being given to one person, or two people, or the one field that's being given to two people. So since one of them is a singular, we can apply the entire verb to that singular, and it'll apply to the two people or the two fields. However, if it's two fields to two people, that's two completely separate transactions, and he has two verbs, then it makes the most sense to parse it as one of the verbs is for one transaction and the other verb is for the other transaction, and therefore the full statement does not apply. That's the middle position. Rav Sheshat amar, afilu shete sadot ushene bnei adam. Rav Sheshat says, like the second lenient view of Rabbi Yochanan, that even 2 to 2, we assume the person said, somewhere in there he said the language of a gift, so we can assume that he meant a gift for all the transactions that are mentioned in his statement. Amad Rav Sheshat, Mina Amin Allah. Rav Sheshat said, what's the source for my opinion to be the most lenient? Tanya, Haomer tenu shekel lebanai beshabat, uruyin liten sela, noten lahen sela. He says, I'm going to prove it from a different law of a person providing for his family. And he says, listen, after I die, or I'm going away, and he leaves behind kids, and he says, I want you to give my kids a shekel every week to provide for them. Now, the truth is that the family is enough kids that a shekel is not enough to sustain them. They need twice that amount, which is a selah. So we give them a selah because we assume he wasn't being precise. He said, give a coin for a week, meaning whatever they need. And so if it's a small family, then maybe a shekel would be sufficient. But if there's already a few kids and they need more, then it will be a selah. We assume he meant sustain them according to their normal needs, which if it's a selah, give them the extra. But if the father, before he went away, says, only give them a shekel, do not give them anything more than a shekel, he's very specific in that case, then we only give them a shekel, even though it won't fully attend to their needs. Nevertheless, he was very specific. V'im amar, im metu yireshu acherim tachtehem, ben shamar tenu, ben shamar al titenu, en notanin lahen ela shekel. But if on his deathbed he said, give a selah to my children, while they're alive, and then when my children die, I want someone else to inherit instead of them. In other words, he wants his children to be sustained as long as they're alive, but he doesn't want, even though the father's dead, so that the state, whoever's managing the estate, should provide for them. And he says something regarding a shekel, but he doesn't want them to permanently inherit. After they die, then he doesn't want it to go to their natural inheritors. He wants it to go to someone else, and he specifies who that other person is. In that case, whether he said the first language of give a shekel to my children every week, or if he said, do not give any more than a shekel every week. In either case, we give them only a shekel, even though they require double that, a selah, for their normal provisions. Why is that? Because since he said that I want other people to inherit it, then we assume he wants as much of his property to be preserved so they can go to those other people. He really wants the money to go to those other people. All right, he has to provide for his kids. All right, he's going to do it, but minimally. And so that shows that whatever language he says, for sure if he says don't give them more than a shekel, anyway, you don't give them more than a shekel. But even if he says give them a shekel, in which if he said nothing else, we would give them a selah, because we assume that he meant I want you to give them whatever they need generously. But if he's holding back and wants to give the rest of the inheritance to someone else after his kids die, then it's clear that he doesn't want to give them anything extra, he means a shekel only and not a sela. All right, that is the braita, and here's Rav Sheshat's proof from this braita. Va'achad de kishte sadot vechishne bnei adam dameh vekatane de kaneh. And this case is the same as 2 fields and 2 people. It's 2 people because his sons are getting some, right? As long as they're alive, they're getting from the inheritance a certain amount, and those other people that he's going to give it to, right now we're assuming there's a straight, they're not related, and these are multiple fields because he's talking about his entire property and his entire inheritance, so we assume that it has multiple parts, and it says it works, even though he did say a language of give, and so you have the language in there, but it's two pieces of land to 2 people, and yet it works. So Rav Sheshat says that's my proof from a baraita. Now this serves as a good proof for Rav Sheshat's opinion, and it would be a challenge to all the other opinions. So hu motiv la vehu mefarek la. Luckily, Rav Sheshat, who himself brought this baraita as a proof for his own position, that's an objection to the others, but Rav Sheshat also provided a resolution for his colleagues. Isn't that nice of him? He brought the proof for himself, a challenge to his colleagues, but he also answers it and says, actually, my colleagues could interpret it if they wanted to in the following way. We could be talking about a case where those others that he's giving it to are people that are in the line of inheritance. So as long as it's in the line of inheritance, if you follow Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, he said that a father can bequeath his entire inheritance, let's say, to one son, or to anyone who's in line to inherit him. He can say, I want everything to go to that person and none to anybody else. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka says, you can't do it to a stranger who's not related to you, but you can do it to a relation who is in line of succession. And so we're talking about that, and that's why it works. Because even if you say the language of Yidashu, which he uses both language, right? He meant to Yidashu achirim tachtem. He uses the word tenu at the beginning of the sentence and then Yidashu at the end. So even though it's 2 fields to 2 people, and you say it works, it's not necessarily a proof for Rav Sheshat that 2 fields to 2 people works. It could be that actually it doesn't work. Over here, the language works because both parties, his sons and the acherim that he's talking about, are both in line to inherit, and we're following the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. Now you have to really limit the case in order to resolve it. So as long as you don't limit the case to only this, only beda ui leirosho, and only opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, which you don't want to do, limit a baraita so much. So as long as you don't limit it, it still is a proof for Rav Sheshat. Amar Rav Asher, Tashema, nechasai lecha v'acharecha yirash peloni, v'acharei acharecha yirash peloni, met rishon kana sheni, met sheni kana shelishi. Rav Asher says, I'm going to bring another proof for Rav Sheshet from a baraita. It's also a tosefta. And this comes from the following case. If someone on his deathbed said, I want all my property when I die to go to you. And after that, after you die, I want it to go to some Reuven. And after that, I want it to go to some other guy, Shimon. And sure enough, that happens. So when this guy dies on his deathbed, it goes to the first person. And then when he dies, then it doesn't go to the heirs of the first person, it goes to the second person. And when that guy dies, it doesn't go to the heirs of the second guy, but rather, as according to the wishes of the deceased, it goes to the third person. The proof is going to be just from this part, the Resha. But we continue with the Sefa. Ve'im met sheni b'chai rishon, yachzru nechasim leyorashe rishon. However, if the second guy dies in the lifetime of the first, then it does not go to the third, but rather to the descendants of the first. In other words, the guy in his deathbed says, I want it to go to Mr. A, then Mr. B, then Mr. C. If they all die in order, then that's fine. But if the guy in deathbed dies, it goes to Mr. A. And now, while A is alive, B dies. So then, when A dies afterwards, it can't go to C because it can only get to C through B. It has to go down the line of the chain that he said. There's no way for it to go directly from A to Mr. C. And therefore, because B died in the middle, now that A dies, what should we do with it? Well, the deceased said it should go to B. Sorry, B's dead. Now you can't go to him. Well, then it stays within A's line of inheritance. That's the sefa of the Baraita. Now, the proof is from the Resha. This case is the same as, similar to, two fields and two people. It's clearly two people because it's actually three people. He says, I'm going to give it to you, Mr. A, and then it's going to go to Mr. B, and so on. It's also like two fields. First of all, because he says, nechasai, all of my property, presumably two fields, even if it's actually only one field, because it's being given over at different times. That's the same as two fields, because it's still a different transaction. You can't call it the same transaction, because one's being given now when the deceased dies, and then one later on when Mr. A dies, and so on. So this is a case of two fields and two people. He says nechasai lecha, which we're interpreting as a gift, and even though he said, then he says yirash. He says the word yirash also. So it says language of gift, language of yirash, two people to two people, and nevertheless it works. It goes to Mr. A and then it goes to Mr. B. So you see, this is a proof for it, Sheshat, that when you have ambiguous language, even if you just say one verb, you say both verbs, even though the verb of giving is only in singular, nevertheless we apply it to both transactions, even though it's two people and two fields. So that seems like a good proof. Now, you might reject this proof. Maybe that Mr. B is actually in the line of succession of the guy on his deathbed. And we're following the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, who says that a person can give it to anybody he wants, as long as it's someone that he will inherit. And therefore, perhaps the Mr. A and Mr. B are both in the line of succession, and Mr. C also. And that's why he is permitted to do this and say, I'm going to give it as an inheritance. You can use the language of inheritance according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka and give it to anybody you want who's in the line. And so if everybody's in the line of inheritance, then that's why it works, not because it's a gift, and then in that case it would not be a proof for Rav Sheshat. But that cannot be, as we're about to see what the full opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka is. If so, when the second guy dies, would it go to the third? It would not, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, because we're about to read a full understanding of Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka about this subject. Ha'shelach Rav Acha bered Rav Avya le'divrei Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka. After all, Rav Acha, the son of Rav Avya, sent the following ruling, explaining that according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, nechasai lecha v'acharecha לפלוני, וראשון ראוי ליורשו, אין לשני במקום ראשון כלום, שאין זה לשון מתנה, אלא לשון ירושה, וירושה אין לה הפסק. According to Rabbi Beroka, if someone says, I want to give all my inheritance to you, Mr. A, and after that, after you die, I want it to go to Mr. B, and the first one is in line of succession to get an inheritance, so therefore, according to Rabbi Beroka, you can give all of your money to one person, let's say to one son, or to anyone who can inherit you, and that's okay within the laws of inheritance. So, see, according to Rabbi Beroka, whenever you have ambiguous language, you don't have to say, oh, he must have meant a gift, because it could mean an inheritance, as long as it's within the right line. In such a case, we don't listen to the full instructions, because in that the second one will not take it after the first one dies. Why? Because this is not a language of a gift, but rather a language of inheritance. And inheritance has no stopping point. Once the person dies and it goes to Mr. A, that's it. The A is the proper inheritor, and when A dies, it goes to A's own line of direct descendants according to the normal laws of inheritance. There's no way that the deceased can say while he's alive, oh, after A dies, I want to go to B. No, that's it. A inherited it. That's fully his to bequeath to his own inheritors, not to to someone else. So it has to follow the normal rules. Therefore, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, what we see is that this baraita cannot be according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, because the baraita says that the language works. When the person dies, it goes to A, and then it goes to B, then it goes to C, assuming B is still alive when A dies. So it does go in line. Well, that only works if, in fact, it has the suggestion of a gift, where it's a gift, but it's a gift on condition. Fine, then the gift on condition can go to this person first, and then to another person. And so, therefore, we reject this challenge to the proof, and it really is a good proof, solid proof for Rav Sheshat. Tiyuvta tikulehu tiyuvta. And with that, we reject all the other opinions. Rav Sheshat, the most lenient opinion, that says if you use this ambiguous language, a double verb, even if it's two feels to two people, it's valid. We assume the person meant the language of gift, because that's the one that will be able to work. And so we assume that that's what he meant. And we reject the first opinion and the middle opinion that said only if it's 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 and 1-to-2. No, it can be 2-to-2. Now, last point. Is this also a rejection of Resh Lakish? Remember, we said Resh Lakish is very similar to the middle opinion of Rabbi Elazar. Except that he gives just a small leniency. If you want to do 2-to-2, then make sure you have a plural verb of gift, because the plural verb, then that means it's talking about two transactions. But otherwise, he doesn't think you can do 2-to-2. But now the case that we just saw before, from the proof here, he didn't use a plural language. He just said, I'm giving it to you, lecha, nechasai lecha. He only said that to one person. It's a singular language of a gift, and yet it works. So this seems to be a rejection of Resh Lakish. Is that true? How could that be? Rava said that the halacha follows Resh Lakish in these three issues, and one of them is this very issue. So if this baraita rejects Resh Lakish, then how could it be that Rava said halacha is like Resh Lakish? We need to resolve this. And the resolution is la kashya, kan betoch kedei dibur, kan lachar kedei dibur. The answer is it depends if he left any time. Betoch kedei dibur is about 2 or 3 seconds, the amount of time it would take to say Shalom Alecha Rabbi. If you say sentence 1 and then say sentence 2 and pause in the meantime more than those 3 seconds, they're considered 2 separate statements. But if you pause just for 1 second, just for a short time, then it's considered to be one continuous statement. It's a whole thing together. And that's how we can resolve the baraita that Rav Ashi said with the statement of Resh Lakish. If you said everything within one sentence, then even Resh Lakish would agree that you could say 2 feels to 2 people and without special language, without a plural, within 2 verbs, even if it's in the singular, as long as you said it continuously with only a very short pause, that's okay. And that's what the baraita was talking about. Resh Lakish should be okay with that. When Resh Lakish said you need a plural verb, that was talking about a case where you said the 2 statements separately. You said, field A is going to go to Mr. A. Then you paused for 3-4 seconds, too long. And then afterwards you said, and field B will go to Mr. B, and both of them should be a gift. Oh, as long as you said both of them should be a gift, then it could work. But otherwise, if you don't use special language, it won't work. So the baraita was without special language, but you said it all at once, that's okay. If you say not special language and pause in the middle, then it's not okay, and you'd need special language. That's what he meant to say in his previous statement. And so now we resolved how halacha can be like Resh Lakish, and still he can work with the baraita. V'hilcheta kol toch kedei dibur ki dibur dameh lebar me'avodah zara v'kiddushin. And the final halacha is that anytime you say something within that short time, you say one phrase and then you said another phrase quickly right after it, it's considered as if it's continuous speech. This has practical ramifications, like in the tefillah, if you said a wrong ending, like you said Ha'el HaKadosh during the 10 days of repentance, when you have to say HaMelech HaKadosh, as long as you fix it and you say the right thing, HaMelech HaKadosh, within those 2 seconds, then you don't have to go go back, right? Then you fixed it, you said the right thing. Or in monetary matters, if you say, I'm going to give this to you as a gift. No, I changed my mind. I'm not going to give it. As long as you said it within that time period, then it's considered a retraction because it's as if you said it all at the same time. However, there are two exceptions. Exception number one is avodah zarah. If a person takes an idol and he says, "You are my God," he says about this idol, he violates idolatry. And even if he retracts it immediately after, within 1 second, still that's considered idolatry, and he'll get capital punishment. So for avodah zarah, we're very strict, and you cannot retract it once you utter something that is idolatry. And so also kiddushin, if a man gives a woman a ring, a coin, and says harat mikudeshet li, and as soon as he says that, that's it. They are betrothed legally. And even if he says immediately after, "No, just kidding, I changed my mind," it doesn't matter. Even if he didn't pause in between, still, once he says that statement, that's it. It's binding, and he cannot undo it with a second phrase, even if the second phrase is said within a short time. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.